Marcus and I met during my recovery period after a particularly toxic relationship with David. I was still piecing myself back together when Marcus walked into the coffee shop where I worked, ordered a complicated drink with way too many specifications, and then tipped generously despite me getting half of them wrong. He came back the next day to give me another chance at making his drink correctly. And the next day, and the day after that, it became our thing. Him pretending he needed his coffee exactly right, me pretending I was slowly learning his preferences. We both knew it was just an excuse to see each other, but neither of us called it out. There was something pure about that dance we did, something that made me feel safe after the chaos David had put me through. Marcus was different from any man I'd dated before. He was steady, reliable, and kind, in a way that seemed almost too good to be true. Where David had been explosive and unpredictable, Marcus was calm and consistent. Where David had torn down my self-esteem with subtle jabs and backhanded compliments, Marcus built me up with genuine praise and unwavering support. We moved in together after a year of dating, and it felt right. Our apartment became a haven of peace and understanding. Sure, we had our disagreements, who doesn't? But we always managed to work through them with respect and patience. At least, that's what I thought until last night. The argument started over something so trivial, I'm almost embarrassed to admit it. Marcus had been working late hours on a big project for weeks, and I'd been feeling neglected. Instead of communicating this clearly, I let my frustration build until it exploded over a forgotten dinner plan. "You said you'd be home by 7, I said, staring at the cold pasta I'd made, his favorite recipe, by the way. "It's nearly 9. Marcus looked genuinely apologetic as he set down his laptop bag. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. The client meeting ran long, and then the team needed to." "The team, the client, the project," I cut him off, my voice sharp. "It's always something, isn't it? At least when David worked late, he had the decency to text." The moment those words left my mouth, I knew I'd crossed a line. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marcus stood completely still, his face a mask of hurt and disbelief. The silence that followed was deafening. "Did you really just compare me to David?" Marcus's voice was quiet, controlled, but I could hear the tremor of anger underneath. "The same David who cheated on you multiple times? The same David who made you feel worthless?" I wanted to take it back immediately. My hands started shaking as I reached for him. "Marcus, I didn't mean." "No." He stepped back, holding up a hand. "I think you did mean it. I think you've been holding on to that comparison for a while now, haven't you?" The truth was, I hadn't been. David was a ghost I thought I'd exorcised long ago. But in that moment of frustration, I'd reached for the weapon I knew would hurt the most. I'd taken the man who had helped me heal and compared him to the man who had broken me. "I was just angry," I tried to explain, my voice small. "You know how I get when I'm angry. I say things I don't mean." "That's the problem, Sarah." Marcus ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture I'd always found endearing, but now seemed laden with exhaustion. "You do this every time we fight. You lash out, say the most hurtful thing you can think of, and then expect me to understand because you were angry." "That's not fair," I protested, though deep down I knew he was right. "I'm not perfect, but neither are you. You've been distant for weeks. You barely touch me anymore. You're always working." "I'm working on a project that could mean a promotion," he interrupted. "A promotion that would let us buy that house you've been dreaming about. The one with the garden you want so badly. I've been killing myself trying to make our future better. And you compare me to your abusive ex?" The word abusive hit me like a slap. I'd never used that term for David, even though it was accurate. Marcus had been the one to gently help me see the truth about my past relationship, to understand that what I'd experienced wasn't normal or okay. "I'm sorry," I whispered, tears finally spilling over. "Please, can we just talk about this? I know I messed up, but..." Marcus shook his head, and something in his expression made my heart stop. I'd seen him angry before, seen him frustrated, but I'd never seen him look so done. "I need some space," he said, already moving toward our bedroom. "I can't do this right now." I followed him, panic rising in my throat as he pulled out his suitcase from under the bed. "What are you doing?" "Marcus, please don't. I'm going to stay with Jake for a while." he said, referring to his best friend who lived across town. He started methodically pulling clothes from the dresser, folding them with the same care he always did, even now. You're overreacting, I said, immediately regretting the words as they left my mouth. If there was one thing Marcus had never been, it was overreactive. That had been David's specialty, and mine, apparently. Marcus paused his packing, his hands gripping a folded shirt so tightly his knuckles turned white. Am I? Tell me something, Sarah. In the 3 years we've been together, have I ever compared you to any of my exes? Have I ever thrown your past in your face during an argument? I couldn't answer because we both knew the truth. Marcus had never done that. He'd never even mentioned his ex-girlfriends except when directly asked, and even then, he spoke of them respectfully. Do you know why I don't do that? He continued, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. Because it's cruel. Because the person you're with deserves to be seen for who they are, not constantly measured against someone from the past. He resumed packing, and I stood there helplessly, watching as he systematically removed traces of himself from our shared space. Each item that went into his suitcase felt like another nail in the coffin of our relationship. I didn't mean to be cruel, I said softly. I was just hurt and angry about feeling neglected. I should have talked to you about it properly instead of letting it build up. Yes, you should have. He zipped up the suitcase and finally turned to face me fully. But you didn't. And you know what hurts the most? It's not even the comparison to David. It's the fact that after 3 years, you still don't trust me enough to just tell me when something's bothering you. Instead, you let it fester until you can use it as ammunition. His words hit home with devastating accuracy. How many times had he encouraged me to be open about my feelings? How many times had he assured me that I could tell him anything, that he wanted to know when I was upset so we could work through it together? I do trust you, I protested weakly. No, you don't. Not really. He picked up his suitcase and laptop bag. If you did, you wouldn't feel the need to hurt me before I could hurt you. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You're still operating on David time, waiting for the other shoe to drop, ready to strike first, because that's what you had to do with him. I wanted to argue, to deny it, but the words stuck in my throat. Because he was right again. Even after 3 years of gentle love and unwavering support, some part of me was still crouched in a defensive position, waiting for the attack that Marcus had never launched. I need time to think, Marcus said, moving toward the door. And I think you do too. You need to figure out if you're really ready to be in this relationship or if you're still fighting battles from your last one. How much time? I asked, hating how small and desperate my voice sounded. When will you come back? He paused at the door, his hand on the handle. I don't know, Sarah. That depends on a lot of things. But right now, I can't be here. Every time I look at you, I hear you comparing me to him, and it makes me question everything. Everything. The word came out as barely more than a whisper. Everything. Every time I worked late, were you sitting here thinking I was like him? Every time I didn't answer a text right away, did you assume the worst? Have you been waiting for me to turn into David this whole time? I wanted to say no, to assure him that wasn't the case, but my silence spoke volumes. Because the truth was, there had been moments, fleeting, shameful moments, when those exact thoughts had crossed my mind. Not because Marcus had given me any reason to doubt him, but because David had left me with scars that ran deeper than I'd realized. That's what I thought, he said quietly. I love you, Sarah. I really do. But I can't compete with a ghost, and I won't be punished for another man's sins. He opened the door, and I made one last desperate attempt to stop him. Please don't go. We can work on this. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever it takes. Maybe you should, he agreed. But not for me, for yourself, because until you really deal with what happened with David, you're not going to be able to fully trust anyone. And nobody deserves to be in a relationship where they're constantly being compared to someone who hurt their partner. The sound of the door closing behind him was surprisingly soft for something that felt so final. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at the space where he had been, replaying our argument in my head. My phone buzzed with a text from him. Made it to Jake's. Don't worry about me. Take care of yourself. Even now, even after what I'd done, he was still thinking about my well-being. The realization made fresh tears spring to my eyes. How had I taken someone so consistently kind and thoughtful and compared him to someone who had treated me so badly? The next few days passed in a blur of unanswered texts and ignored calls. Well, not ignored exactly. Marcus always responded, but his messages were polite and distant, lacking the warmth and playfulness that had characterized our relationship for so long. I need more time. Please respect my space. We'll talk when I'm ready. Each message was another twist of the knife I'd plunged into our relationship. I threw myself into work, trying to keep busy, but everywhere I looked in our apartment, I saw reminders of what I'd lost. His coffee mug in the dish rack, his favorite blanket on the couch, the family photos he'd hung so carefully on our walls. A week after he left, I ran into his sister Maya at the grocery store. The look she gave me wasn't angry, just disappointed, which somehow felt worse. "He told you?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "He did," she nodded. "You really messed up, Sarah." "I know," I whispered, fighting back tears. "Is he? How is he?" Maya sighed, adjusting her shopping basket. "He's hurt. Really hurt. You know Marcus, he puts everything into his relationships. He's not the kind of guy who does things halfway. When he commits fully." "I know that," I said defensively. "Do you?" She gave me a searching look. "Because comparing him to David, that wasn't just a low blow, Sarah. That was you telling him that all his efforts to be a good partner meant nothing. That no matter what he did, you'd always be waiting for him to turn into the monster your ex was." Put like that, it sounded even worse than I'd imagined. "I didn't mean it that way." "Maybe not consciously," Maya agreed. "But you know what Marcus told me? He said he feels like he's been set up to fail from the beginning, like he's been trying to prove himself worthy of trust that you were never really willing to give him." The truth of her words hit me hard. How many times had Marcus demonstrated his trustworthiness? How many times had he gone out of his way to make me feel secure, only for me to throw it all back in his face the moment I felt vulnerable? "I want to fix this," I told her. "I need to fix this." Maya's expression softened slightly. "Then fix yourself first. Deal with your trauma instead of making Marcus pay for it. He deserves better than being punished for David's sins." She was right, of course. They were all right. I'd been carrying David's ghost into every aspect of my relationship with Marcus, tainting something beautiful with old fears and unresolved trauma. That night, I did something I should have done years ago. I made an appointment with a therapist. Then I sat down and wrote Marcus a letter, not asking him to come back, not making excuses for my behavior, but acknowledging the hurt I'd caused and explaining the steps I was taking to work on myself. I didn't expect a response, so when my phone buzzed with his name 2 days later, my heart nearly stopped. "I got your letter," his message read. "I'm glad you're getting help. It's the right step." "Can we meet?" I typed back, hands shaking. "Just to talk?" The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before his response came through. "Okay. Coffee shop where we met? Saturday at 2? It felt fitting, meeting where it all began. I arrived early, claiming our old usual table by the window. When Marcus walked in, my breath caught in my throat. He looked tired, like he hadn't been sleeping well, but still handsome in that effortless way of his. He ordered his complicated drink, the same one he'd used as an excuse to see me all those years ago, and joined me at the table. "You look good," I said softly. "You look tired," he replied, not unkindly. "I haven't been sleeping well," I admitted. "Been doing a lot of thinking." "Me too." He took a sip of his coffee. "I've been thinking about why your comparison to David hurt so much. It's not just because of who he was or what he did to you. It's because it made me realize that you never fully let him go. He's been there all along, this shadow between us." I nodded, fighting back tears. "I know. I'm starting to understand that now. The therapist I'm seeing, she's helping me see how much I was still operating from a place of fear. How unfair that was to you." "It was unfair to you too," Marcus said quietly. "Living in fear like that, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. That's no way to live, Sarah." We sat in silence for a moment, both lost in thought. Finally, I gathered my courage to ask the question I'd been dreading. "Can we fix this?" Marcus set down his cup carefully, considering his words. "I don't know. I love you. That hasn't changed. But I need to know that if we try again, you're really going to be with me, not looking over your shoulder for David's ghost. I need to know that you can see me for who I am, not who you're afraid I might become. I understand, I said. And for the first time, I truly did. I need to do this work for myself first. You deserve someone who can love you without fear, who can trust you without constantly testing that trust. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand briefly, the first physical contact we'd had since that night. You deserve that too, Sarah. You deserve to heal, to move forward without carrying all that old pain. Will you? I hesitated, then forced myself to continue. Will you wait for me? Marcus withdrew his hand gently. I can't promise that. It wouldn't be fair to either of us. This kind of healing, it takes time, and I need to take care of myself too. The finality. In his voice broke something in me, but I understood. He was right. Asking him to put his life on hold while I worked through my issues would just be another form of unfairness. I'm moving out, he said softly. Jake's cousin has an apartment available next month. I think we both need a clean break to figure things out. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. This was really happening. The life we'd built together was ending, not with a bang, but with a quiet conversation in the coffee shop where it had all begun. I'll come by next weekend to get the rest of my things, he continued. Jake will help me. If you want, maybe you could not be there? I think it would be easier. Okay, I managed to whisper. I'll make sure I'm out. We finished our coffees in silence, both lost in our own thoughts. As we stood to leave, Marcus hesitated for a moment. I hope you find what you're looking for, Sarah, he said. I hope you learn to trust again, really trust. Without reservations, you deserve that kind of peace. So do you, I replied. You deserve someone who sees you for exactly who you are. Someone who doesn't make you pay for another man's mistakes. He nodded once, then turned and walked away. I watched him go, remembering all the times I'd watched him walk through those same doors, knowing he'd be back. This time was different. This time I was watching him walk away for good, and I had no one to blame but myself. As I made my way home to my empty apartment, I realized that sometimes the hardest lessons come wrapped in the most painful packages. I'd lost a good man because I couldn't let go of a bad one. But maybe, just maybe, this loss would be the catalyst I needed to finally face my demons and learn to love without fear. Marcus deserved better than being compared to David. And maybe, once I'd done the work I needed to do, I would deserve better too.